There is a Yoruba proverb that says, "The man who wears borrowed clothes to a festival must pray that the owner does not arrive before the dancing begins." Tunde did not know this proverb, or perhaps he knew and ignored it. In the busy city of Lagos, Tunde was famous for looking rich. Nobody knew where his money came from. Nobody knew what business he truly did. Yet, every morning, he stepped out looking like a man who owned half of Victoria Island. His suits were always sharp. His shoes sparkled like mirrors. His perfumes announced his arrival before he entered the room. The young ladies admired him. The young men envied him. Only the people living in his compound knew a different story. Tunde lived in a face-me-I-face-you apartment hidden inside a crowded part of Lagos. The building had seen better days. The paint had long surrendered to the weather. The roof leaked whenever rain fell. The tenants fought over water as if they were competing for an Olympic medal. But every morning, Tunde emerged from the compound looking like the chairman of the multinational company. His room was so small that if he stretched both hands, he could almost touch both walls. A tired standing fan stood in one corner like an old watchman who had given up on life. Yet, inside that tiny room, hung expensive suits and designer shirts. Tunde had a strange philosophy. Whenever he earned money, he spent it on appearance. Food could wait, rent could wait, savings could wait, but a new suit, that could never wait. One afternoon, his landlord stopped him outside the compound. "Tunde," the man said, "you owed for 4 months." Tunde smiled. "My landlord, great investment requires patience." The landlord stared at him. "What investment?" Tunde pointed at his suit. "This is branding." The landlord nearly fainted. "Branding? You are owing rent and talking about branding." The tenants nearby burst into laughter. One woman whispered to another, "This boy is suffering from expensive dreams." Her friends nodded. The dream is expensive, the reality is very cheap. But Tunde paid no attention. He believed appearance was everything. Whenever he wanted to impress a woman, he rented luxury vehicles. He knew almost every car rental companies in Lagos. Sometimes he rented cars for only 3 hours, sometimes for a whole day. One Saturday afternoon, he arrived at the compound in a black SUV. The vehicle looked powerful enough to transport a governor. Children abandoned their football match. Women stopped washing clothes. Old men adjusted their caps. One elderly man looked carefully. "Is that not Tunde?" His friends nodded. "The same Tunde who borrowed garri from me last week." The old man frowned. "Then whose car is that?" Only God knew. As Tunde stepped out of the vehicle wearing dark sunglasses, the children surrounded him. One little boy pointed at the driver. "Uncle Tunde, if the car is yours, why is another man driving it?" The compound exploded with laughter. Tunde immediately pretended not to hear. When it came to women matter, he was even more creative. He had a wealthy friend named Kunle. Kunle owned a beautiful mansion in Lekki. Whenever Tunde wanted to impress a lady, he called Kunle. "My brother," he would say, "I need your house for a few hours." Kunle would laugh. "Another girlfriend? This one is special." They are always special. Still, Kunle usually agreed because the whole situation entertained him. One day, Tunde brought a lady to the mansion. While they were talking, she pointed at a family portrait. "Is this your family?" The photograph showed Kunle, his wife, and their 3 children. Without blinking, Tunde replied, "Yes, we are a very united family." The lady frowned. "The children look exactly like the man who opened the gate." Tunde smiled. Strong family resemblance. Even the walls of the mansion must have laughed that day. Then, one afternoon, he met Bimpe. Bimpe was beautiful, fashionable, and loved luxury. She enjoyed expensive restaurants, designer handbags, and social media attention. The moment she saw Tunde stepping out of a luxury SUV, she became interested. To Bimpe, Tunde looked like a successful businessman. To Tunde, Bimpe looked like the perfect woman to complete his fake rich man's image. And so began a relationship that was built not on truth, but on appearance. Neither of them knew that one day reality would arrive uninvited. Months passed. The relationship grew stronger. Tunde continued renting cars. He continued borrowing Kunle's mansion. He continued telling stories about business deals and investments that existed only in his mind. Bimpe believed every word. Soon, Tunde proposed marriage. Bimpe accepted immediately. The wedding preparation began, and the lie became even bigger. The moment people heard that Tunde was getting married to Bimpe, the city began to talk. Some said he was a wealthy businessman. Others claimed he owned properties in Lekki, Ikoyi and Abuja. One woman even told her friend that Tunde was involved in oil and gas. Nobody knew where she got the information from. But as the Yoruba says, when a rumor starts running, even the truth struggled to catch it. The wedding day arrived like a festival. The event center glittered with decorations. Music shook the walls. Food flowed like a river after heavy rain. Guests arrived dressed in expensive asoebi. Some came to celebrate, others came to inspect. A few came simply because there would be free food. Tunde arrived in a convoy of rented luxury cars. The sight was enough to make people forget their troubles. Guests rushed outside to wash. Ah, see cars oh, money is talking. One uncle adjusted his cap. This young man has made it. Another uncle nodded. I heard he owns business overseas. The first man sighed. My own son only owns a wheelbarrow. Inside the vehicle, Tunde sat proudly, but appearance was everything. The wedding ceremony went smoothly. The pastor prayed, the choir sang, family members smiled, photographers moved around like hunters chasing antelopes. Soon, Tunde and Bimpe exchanged vows. The crowd erupted with applause. Bimpe's heart was full of happiness. She believed she had finally married the wealthy man of her dreams. The reception was even grander. Guests danced. Money spread through the air. People took photographs. Videos flooded social media. Many young women watched the clips and sighed, God, when? Little did they know that the answer to that prayer should never be Tunde. Throughout the celebration, Tunde smiled, yet inside him lived a restless fear. A man who carries a pot full of lies on his head must watch carefully. One wrong step can expose everything. Several times during the reception, he imagined his landlord appearing from nowhere. In his imagination, the men climbed the stage and shouted, Tunde, forget this wedding. Where is my rent? The thought nearly gave him a heart attack. As evening approached, the reception ended. Guests began to leave. The musicians packed their instruments. The decorators started removing their decorations. Soon, it was time for the newly wedded to leave. Bimpe was excited. She could not wait to see her husband's mansion. For months, she had imagined it. A large gate, a swimming pool, a beautiful staircase, a spacious bedroom, a walk-in closet, perhaps even a cinema room. As they entered the vehicle, she smiled. Tunde, I can't wait to see our home. Tunde felt his stomach turn. The home she imagined existed only inside her imagination. The journey began. At first, Bimpe chatted excitedly about furnitures and decorations. Tunde answered with short responses. His mind was busy searching for a miracle. Unfortunately, miracles rarely attend weddings built on lies. As they moved through the city, Bimpe noticed something strange. The road became narrower. The houses became older. The neighbors looked less impressive. She frowned. Tunde, are we taking a shortcut? Something like that. Minutes later, the roads became rougher. Street traders filled the roadside. Children chased football through dusty streets. Women carried buckets on their heads. Motorcycles buzzed around like angry bees. Bimpe became confused. Are you sure we are going the right way? Yes. At last, the vehicle stopped. Bimpe looked outside. Before her stood an old face-me-I-face-you building. Clothes hung through the roofs. Buckets lined the corridors. Several women stood near a communal tap, discussing matters that did not concern them. Children ran around the compound. One goat was chewing cardboard. Bimpe blinked, then blinked again. Surely there had been a mistake. She turned towards Tunde. Why are we here? Tunde swallowed. Years of lies had finally arrived at their destination. With trembling hands, he pointed towards a tiny room upstairs. Bimpe, my darling, that is our apartment up there. For a moment, she thought she had heard wrongly. Then she realized he was serious, and her world began to shake. The elders say that no matter how long a masquerade dances, one day the masks will fall. For Tunde, that day had arrived. Bimpe stepped out of the vehicle and stared at the building. Then she looked at Tunde, then stared at the building in confusion. Finally, she spoke. "Tunde, where is the house?" "This is the house," Tunde responded. Bimpe laughed, not because something was funny, but because her mind refused to accept reality. "This building, the one with clothes hanging everywhere, the one with people sharing bathroom." "Yes," Tunde replied quietly. News spread through the compound immediately. Heads appeared at windows, doors opened, children abandoned their games. Women stopped washing clothes only to get the gist that is happening. Even an old man sleeping under the tree woke up and joined the audience. An old woman adjusted her wrapper. "What is happening?" Another woman smiled. "It appears somebody has discovered the truth." The old woman nodded. "Then, this evening will not be boring." Bimpe pointed at Tunde. "What about the mansion in Lekki?" "It belongs to my friend Kunle." "What?" "It belongs to Kunle. The house where you always received me. The one you said your father built is Kunle's house." "Yes," Tunde replied. The crowd gasped. One tenant nearly dropped her bucket. Another whispered, "This story is sweeter than television." Bimpe continued. "What of the cars?" "I rented them." "The luxury cars?" "Yes." "The convoy at the wedding?" Tunde lowered his head. "Also rented." A loud cry escaped Bimpe. "The business is inko." Silence. "The investments that you told me about? What about the properties?" "Tunde, please answer me," she shouted. Finally, Tunde spoke. "There are no properties." The compound exploded. Even the goats stopped chewing. "What exactly do you do for a living?" Bimpe asked. Tunde cleared his throat. "I do different jobs." "What kind of job?" "Whatever I can find." The crowd erupted. A little boy laughed so hard that he fell into a bucket. An elderly man wiped tears from his eyes. "This is the best entertainment I have seen all year." Bimpe stood there in disbelief. Everything suddenly made sense. The stories, the excuses, the fake meetings, the borrowed luxury, the rented lifestyles. A castle built with lies had finally collapsed. She removed her wedding veil. Then she removed her ring. The compound became silent. Bimpe looked directly at Tunde. "Tunde, I could have married a poor man." For one brief second, hope entered his heart. Then she continued, "But I can never marry a liar." She threw the ring. It struck his chest before falling into the dust. Tunde bent down and picked it up. His hands trembled. Years of pretending had brought him into this moment. Bimpe turned towards her family. "We are leaving." Without another word, she walked away. Her relatives followed behind immediately. One auntie hissed loudly. Another shook her head. A cousin laughed until tears rolled down his cheek. Within minutes, they were gone. The compound remained quiet. Then the gossip began. "I always knew something was wrong. The boy wears suit worth more than the building. The day I saw him eating garri with a designer sunglasses, I knew trouble was coming." Laughter erupted everywhere. Night slowly covered the compound. One by one, the tenants returned to their rooms. Only Tunde remained outside, alone, defeated. A man who had spent years pretending to be rich had become famous for being poor. The rented cars, the borrowed mansions, and the expensive suit could not save him. The masquerade had danced for too long. The mask had finally fallen. And as the elders would say, the man who built his house with lies should not be surprised when the wind carries it away. If you have watched to this point, my dear, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share these stories. And please turn on your notification button so that once we drop our stories, you'll be among the first set of people that will see them. Thank you.